What's up, everybody? My name is Michael, and this is a deck tech video. Hopefully you guys enjoy these. So I haven't made a video in a while, and thought I'd show you guys my latest creation, and I feel it's very well placed right now, and it's not the Shaman deck I mentioned on Twitter. If you guys were following me on Twitter, which is at Kiratze, you can see in the bottom right there, I mentioned I was going to show you guys a sweet Shaman deck I made that was helping me rank up last season. At the end of last season, I got to rank 11, which is my personal best, from rank 15. And obviously, the new season has started. I'm struggling my way through some of the naturally higher skilled players because obviously the new season makes them lower ranks. So it's a little bit tough, but I've actually climbed from rank 20 with the deck I'm about to show you. And it's very surprising this early in the season I'm actually able to actually climb. Going against a lot of just extremely tough decks is and beating them with a unique list is really gratifying. It's really fun to see that. So I'll show you guys the Shaman list. I'm not gonna go through this. This isn't the deck tech. This isn't the deck I'm doing for this deck tech episode, but this was the list I was going to show you guys. It's obviously changed over the course of time, but this is what the list was. It was essentially just a mid-range, more on the control side of things, Shaman list that had a lot of fun things with Farsight, and Emperor Thorson was an extremely great addition to this deck. But I don't really know what it was. Maybe I got psyched out at the start of this season, knowing I'm going against a bunch of higher ranked players or naturally higher skilled players at the start of the season. But I went on a heavy loss streak with this deck, and which I was sort of confused because at the end of last season I was on a win streak with this list. So I don't really know what it was. Maybe it was even just the addition of Emperor Thorson. I don't know, and all the druids coming out of the woodwork, but. This list was got put on a heavy loss streak. So I was irking myself to make a new deck. And really I was inspired to make a new deck from my quest log. Because I had 3 quests. I had a quest log full of warrior quests. And I was like, well, let's get this over with. I want some extra gold. I don't want to just keep re-rolling quests and hopefully getting shaman quests or something. So I made a warrior deck, and that's the deck I'm about to show you. It is a Mech warrior deck. I don't really know how to explain it. It's just a Mech warrior list that I came up with that I think is actually really well placed right now, and it's actually doing really well. It's holding a mid to high 60% win rate. So not too bad considering it's just the start of the season, and yeah, a lot of druids, and this deck I think is actually fairly well matched up against druid. It's doing very well against mage. I played against tempo mage and mech mage, and I actually think for the mech mage, it is a 65. I would say a 60 to 40 for us, in terms of win ratio, because mech mage was the deck that I looked towards for inspiration to building my mech warrior list, because obviously mech mage is the mech deck to play. The problem is, I think Mech Mage is absolutely boring to play, and it's not fun to watch. It doesn't seem like it has very fun interactions. It's very linear. This Mech Warrior list has a lot more options towards it. It gives you more options to get out of stickier situations. It's not as linear, and it allows you to play a little bit more of a mid-range setup than an aggressive setup. And we're also... So here's the thing with Mech Mage versus my Mech Warrior list is I had to sort of look. I watched quite a few Mech Mage lists, and I've played against quite a few Mech Mages. And the one thing I noticed is the few things I noticed about Mech Mage is what makes them good. Well, they have some fairly tempo and mana efficient spells through cards like Mirror's Entity and Frostbolt and Fireball. They have the ability to flood the board very well, and they also have Snow Chugger, which is very good against Oil Rogue and stuff like that, and Weaponed Warriors. They have a lot more synergy with Archmage with cards like Archmage Antonidas, and they can make better use of their spare parts, I think, than my list can. But what makes Mech Mage bad? Well, I found Mech Mage was bad when they get run out of resources, they don't have their pieces in hand, and they don't draw Archmage Antonidas late game once they have a handful of spare parts. That essentially meant a few things to me. If I can have a list that does favorable trades, is able to take control of the board much easier, and is able to apply more pressure than they can, as well as just having higher quality minions, will more often than not win games against Mech Mage. And that's what this list essentially is the core of. The fact that this list actually ended up being fairly good against other lists has been sort of shocking to me. I didn't actually think this list was going to do too well, because, you know, we're trying to make a Mech Warrior deck. I mean, come on. I never imagined a Mech Warrior deck actually doing very well, and this deck is done extraordinary. Okay, maybe not extraordinary. I mean, I'm probably tooting my own horn here, but it's done a ton better than I thought it would. And there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. It's an extremely fun deck to play. If you want a mech deck that's not Mech Mage, I definitely recommend giving this a try, because I think it actually does some interesting things. And when it seems, I actually have found base hunters aren't as prevalent. Sorry, just taking a drink of water. It seems like things have slowed down a little bit. Mid-range paladin's pretty popular. Seeing a lot more priests, actually. And also druid is just the flavor of the month, thanks to Emperor Thorison. So, and this deck does pretty well against most of those matchups. We're even with most of them, if not a little bit higher. So I'm gonna go through the list. Here's the list I have so far. I just made this deck today, but I was just so excited to share it with you guys. I just wanted to get this video out. Now I do have the list and sort of small thoughts on the card lists. If you just would rather have a quick overview of the deck, go check out my blog at mygamermind.wordpress.com. Link is in the description below. I'll be having this video on there as well, but I actually wasn't going to do a video version of this deck tech. I have the written version on my website, on my blog, but I wasn't going to do a video. But then I felt, well, this deck actually has some pretty interesting synergies, and I feel some of the card choices I do need to talk about, and I love being in-depth, you guys know that, so hopefully you guys don't mind a longer video as usual. But with, you know, you guys have seen the list here. I have the picture on my blog if you want to take a look at it there. And if you if you want to do something else and just close the window and do something else while you just listen to my voice, that's perfectly fine. No harm done. So let's get on with the cards, and I will talk about them very thoroughly, because that is what I like to do. 2 executes. Just one of the best removal spells in Warriror. Not much to say there. If your opponent's large minion trades down, next turn you can play a threat, and for 1 mana, kill off their large threat. It's that simple. I don't really know what to say there. It has some small synergies with our weapons, since we're able to hit minions and then execute them. Has some small synergy with Cruel Taskmaster as well, being an activator, but that's, yeah. Allows our minions to trade up, and for 1 mana, kill off a minion, a big threat, or it allows us to just have a little bit more board control. But really execute, because it's really our only removal spell. We sort of have to just make sure we analyze how the matchup's going and what possible big threats they might have that we really can't deal with. Obviously, a lot of the time we're really going to be using our minions to deal with threats on the board, so that's going to be the main thing. But obviously cards like Ragnaros, stuff like that. Like, we have big game hunters, but there are certain threats that you really just sometimes need to execute, and it's just, you know, mana efficient. You know, being able to kill off a Druid of the Claw for 1 mana is very, very good, while being able to progress our own board. So 2 of them, no questions asked. 1, Upgrade. Now, Upgrade is an interesting choice that I think is a little bit underrated. I realize why Upgrade's bad, and I realize why Upgrade isn't played in Control Warrior and stuff like that. Because, you know, obviously they're not going to use up a card slot for a card like Upgrade. It's just not very efficient for them. It's not very good for them. In this list, however, when we're trying to be a little bit more aggressive with our weapons at times, Upgrade is extremely good. Not only does it give our weapon an additional damage so we can potentially trade up with our weapon, it gives us an extra use out of our weapon, which is extremely strong, I think. I actually think that's really, really huge, and it's something that I think a lot of people overlook with Upgrade. Now, obviously the big thing is you need a weapon to make the best out of it. A 1/3 weapon for 1 mana and a card slot sucks. It sucks really, really bad. Really, the only matchup I do the 1/3 weapon in is Paladin, because for 1 mana we can deal with multiple 1/1 hero powers they produce. So they're spending 2 mana, and we're dealing with 3 of, you know, for 6 mana they can make 3 1/1s over the course of 3 turns, and we can pretty much counter that with 1 mana, which is a lot better for us. So upgrade the 1/3 weapon. That's the only matchup I do the 1/3 mainly. Like, obviously there are exceptions when I absolutely need that 1/3, but Paladin's really the only one you want to do that for. Otherwise, you want to wait till you have a weapon in hand. I know that's not great sometimes, but really because we only have one of them, there really hasn't been a time yet I haven't played it on top of a weapon, and it just makes your weapons better. It can totally change the game, to be honest. Being able to upgrade your Fiery War Axe and then still play something is extremely huge. So, for example, against like a Mech deck or Face Hunter or Paladin, a lot of the time they'll do turn 2 Mech Warper, they'll do turn 2 Juggler. So turn 2 we Fiery War Axe, deal with their threat. Turn 3 comes around, we can upgrade, which upgrades our weapon to a 4 damage. But not only that, the big thing is it gives us an extra use out of our weapon. So we can deal with another threat on their board and then play our own Mech Warper, for example. Which means we're just getting a ton of value out of that weapon over the course of a few turns. And we can really just control the board from there and then become the aggressor. So not only that, is like, if we really need it to, upgrade combined with like an Arcanite Reaper. That's like 18 damage over the course of 3 turns, which is a lot of burn. And also, you know, Arcanite Reaper is just insane on its own. If we need it to, it kills off Emperor Thorson, which is a really, really big threat now. So that's the main reason I have Arcanite Reaper. Excuse me. We're only playing 1, but so I might experiment with 2, but I feel weapons, I don't want to get too clogged with weapons. Like, we are still playing 2, 3, 4, 5 weapons, and I think that's enough in this list. So yeah, that is that. Fiery War Axe. 2 of them, not much to say there. It's one of the Warrior's best turn 2 plays. Kills off a ton of things. I mean, if we needed to, kills off North Track Clerics. If we needed to, kills off Jugglers, kills off Mech Warpers, kills off Snow Triggers. Yeah, yada yada yada. It's just an amazing card. Enough said. Cruel Taskmaster, activator for execute, but it also can give us a little bit of extra damage on our minions if we need to push damage through. And, you know, the 1 damage, just being able to kill off any 1 health minions against, like, Face Hunter or something like that, is also an option. Not much to say there. Cruel Taskmaster has been really, really good for us in this list, and yeah, we only need 1 of them. 2 Mech Warper is just a staple of pretty much any mech list. I mean, it's a 2/3 with taunt. I mean, everyone knows that. Your opponent really just doesn't want it left on the board. So it eats up removal, but even if it is left alone, you could essentially just take over the board from there. Not much to say there. Mech Warper is just how it's supposed to go. The one thing I like about it, though, is because we're running, the main reason I wanted to make a Warrior mech list is because of Screwjane Clunker. This card's amazing, actually, in a mech list, and I feel that people have glazed over it quite frequently. I don't really see much talk about it. Maybe because it's a 2/5 that doesn't do anything unless it has a mech, but when you're playing a list like this, when essentially you want to have favorable trades and have sticky minions, Screwjane Clunker is extremely good. And being able to do turn 2 Mech Warper into turn 3 Screwjane Clunker not only makes your Mech Warper really only killable by a fireball or some hard removal, but it also makes it a 4/5. So you're just getting a lot of. So you're sacrificing an extra body essentially for a bigger body. And also just future investment on better minions later on, because your mechs will cost 1 less for longer, because your Mech Warper will stay alive longer. It also usually means your opponent will have to expend more resources to actually kill it, so that's actually not a bad thing either. 3 Big Game Hunter, or sorry, 1 Big Game Hunter, I just saw the 3 there, my mind's totally blanking. Big Game Hunter is just a way for us to kill off big threats. It's just a good tech card to have. I mean, it kills off Big Game Hunter, or it kills off Dr. Booms, kills off a lot of other big legendaries, kills off Ragnaros, for example. It's just, I might try the deck without it. I might try running something else. I don't really know what I would run, though, and I think just for 3 mana, being able to kill off a 7 mana, 7+ mana minion, or even just a big buffed minion is worth to have just as a tech card, because it can really just swing the game in your favor. 3 Harvest Golem Oh, Big Game Hunter also has some minor synergy with Cruel Taskmaster. We can actually, if we absolutely need to, we can, you know, for example, Cruel Taskmaster, the opponent's Emperor Thorson, and then Big Game Hunter it. Obviously, you're spending 2 cards to do that, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, and that option is available for us. 2 Harvest Golem. I keep seeing the 3 there. I should really just pay more attention. 2 Harvest Golem. Harvest Golem and Spider Tank are just really, really good turn 3 plays. It's just very efficient threats for us. Really, again, the goal for us is trying to have effective trades and or sticky minions. And Spider Tank and Harvest Golem are both that. Harvest Golem is a sticky minion, and Spider Tank is a stat-efficient minion. Yeah, so not much to say there. It's also a perfect... They're both 2 perfect cards to follow up with a Screwdrain Clunker. So making Harvest Golem a 4/5 or making Spider Tank a 5/6 allows us to take over the board very, very easily, and also trade with multiple minions fairly well. Even Harvest Golem, though, there's been some times where I've even traded Harvest Golem with a minion and it's died, but the 2/1 it leaves behind can still be buffed by Screwdrain Clunker, so we can still get a 4/3 afterwards if we need it to, which is still a fairly good threat. It still threatens a lot of things, and it's just a good token to have afterwards. So yeah, not much to say there. It's just good 3 drops to play on curve in this list. Arathi Weaponsmith is a little bit more of an interesting choice. So I didn't want to fill my deck with weapons, but I still wanted to have enough weapons. And Arathi Weaponsmith giving us a 2/2 weapon is still nice to have against a lot of different decks. It allows us to trade with multiple small minions, but it also allows us to use our lower minions to trade up, so if we need it to. So for example, we can trade up a Harvest Golem plus using our weapon from Arathi Weaponsmith into an Azure Drake or something like that. But the main thing is it also gives us a body on the board, because like I said, we're trying to just keep board presence. Not necessarily board control, but we always want to have something on the board. It's very important for this deck. And so I wanted to try out Arathi Weaponsmith, and it actually is proved quite well. And also Upgrade just makes it better. Getting a 3 damage weapon with 3 durability is very, very good, because it kills off Piloted Shredders, kills off a lot of other 3 health minions. It's just overall very, very good for us. And I like Arathi Weaponsmith just as a 1-of, actually. It's sometimes you just need that 2/2 weapon, and having a body on board just makes it much better. Arcane Nullifier. Arcane Nullifier was a fairly recent addition after I got a small loss streak against some face decks. Arcane Nullifier, not only is it a mech, so it goes along with our theme, but it's a great card to target with Screwdrain Clunker. Making a 4/7 with taunt that can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Very tough for opponents to deal with, especially when they are playing like a face deck. They have to expend multiple minions to deal with it, since they can't kill command it. And even if they have to like use hounds to break through it, it's just not very good for them. So it's just a good roadblock for a lot of face decks, but we have synergy with Screwdrain Clunker. I mean, that's just a really big thing for us. So it's just a taunt that makes it so our opponents have to use their minions to remove it. Like obviously it can be Black Knighted and stuff like that, but it does restrict our opponent's resources to make them more influenced to have to use their minions on board to deal with it, rather than just throwing a fireball or throwing a polymorph at it. 2 Piloted Shredders, just a staple in mech lists, just really good. Not much to say there. Screwdrain Clunker, this is the main reason I wanted to play Mech Warrior, because I actually felt buffing, so like I tried to look at mechs, and I found a lot of them aren't always stat efficient, because they usually come with a pretty good effect. So Harvest Golem is a 2/3 for 3, but it gives you a 2/1 when it dies. Mech Warper is a 2/3 for 2, which is actually fairly stat efficient, but it doesn't trade that well. Piloted Shredder is a 4/3 for 4, but it gives you a minion at the end. Screwdrain Clunker fixes that pretty much. it makes all of our previous mechs better when we're trying to create a board presence, but it also progresses the board as well. And when all of the time in mid-range decks, you really are trying to fight for board control, Screwjoint and Clunker can help you trade up and trade more effectively. We want to try and get the most effective trades we can with this list, while still keeping a board presence. And not only that, Screwjoint and Clunker is just a 2/5, which allows us to. It's big enough that it's a little bit annoying to deal with, but it also has enough attack where we can deal with some smaller minions if we need it to. So Screwjoint and Clunker has been extremely, extremely, extremely good. If we need it to, like, if we can identify if we're the beatdown deck as well, you know, we can buff Piloted Shredder into a 6/5 and just start hitting face. And again, your opponent has to expend multiple resources to deal with that. So, yeah, I love Screwjoint and Clunker. And it's a mech. I've actually, a lot of the time, have played Screwjoint Clunker on a Screwjoint Clunker, making a 4/7, which is sort of funny. And, you know, those kinds of threats can deal with multiple things on the board, and it's just very annoying for your opponent to deal with it. It's very clunky because while we're buffing minions, we're not necessarily buffing them enough to get them into cards like Big Game Hunter. So it's really, really nice. Sorry, I just need to take another drink here. One Arcanite Reaper, I think I glazed over this, but just one of the Warrior's best spells. It's sort of like our Fireball in Mech Mage. It does a lot of damage, but obviously we're losing 1 damage and paying an extra mana for the benefit of being able to get 2 uses out of it. And it also just gets better with Upgrade. So yeah, not much to say there. With Upgrade, we can essentially get it. It essentially becomes 3 fireballs when you combine it with Upgrade, which is pretty cool. So that happens. But yeah, not much to say there. Especially with Emperor Thorson being played, it's just a way for us to deal with it. One anti-heal bot. So that is one thing because I don't think, obviously, Mech Mage doesn't run anti-heal bot. They don't really need to, because they're pretty much the aggressive deck. They're not really playing a more mid-range list. Anti-heal bot was sort of needed in this list once I realized how many weapons I have. Obviously, the downside of using a weapon is you usually have to attack into a minion that's going to hurt you back. So you are going to be taking some damage, and while we are trying to weave our hero power to stabilize in between turns when we can, when we have the mana to, anti-heal bot is just a way for us to stabilize once we've taken board control. It is also a nice card playing against mages. We do have some good cards to play against mage when they play Mirror Entity, and anti-heal bot is a good card to play into Mirror Entity, because we actually have quite a few cards late game that we really don't want our opponent to have. So being able to have that to pop Mirror Entity is really, really important in those matchups. And it's a card to stabilize. And it gives us a body on the board, and the body on the board's never really that good. You know, a 3/3 for 5 sucks. But you know, if we have a Screwjoint Clunker in hand, we can always Screwjoint Clunker onto the anti-heal bot, and we have a 5/5, which is a good body to have, a very, very good body to have. Blingtron. So this was I opened Blingtron in a random pack, and I really wanted to make a deck with it. And Blingtron is really good. I think it's a really good card. Maybe not so much in a lot of different decks. Like, obviously you really need specific decks for Blingtron. That is just sort of the nature of the card. It is a random effect as well, but in this list, it's a burn with a body. And I was looking through, okay, what weapons are exactly available to us? Well, there are 18 weapons in Hearthstone, and they're the average attack and durability. These are stats I'm pulling from the internet, but 3 attack and 2.8 durability, which is really, really good stats, or fairly good stats, I would say, when you want a weapon. Pretty much any weapon that you get that's 3 and above is good in terms of damage for us, because we are essentially going to be using those weapons for burn. Blingtron has ended so many games for me, and it's really, really good. I've gotten Gore Howls from it. I've gotten other Arcanite Reapers. I've gotten Death Spites. It gives you a body, and it gives you a weapon for burn. Now, obviously, you are giving your opponent a weapon as well. But because usually a lot of the time we are playing a little bit more of an aggressive side, you know, we are hitting their face as much as we can when we're not trying to control the board, we are able to just keep applying pressure, and we don't really care too much if they get a weapon, because by the point that they get a weapon, they're going to be at a fairly low health, and we're going to usually have a board presence that they're going to have to use spells to deal with rather than their weapon, because they won't want to actually hit our minions because they're going to be already at a fairly low health. And knowing that, Blingtron is really, really good because we can keep up pressure and possibly just end the game off. Like, I have played it and then have gotten a Gore Howl and just hit them in the face for 7. I have also gotten, what is it? I've gotten I forget what it's called, but it's the Shaman weapon, the Shaman Epic weapon that gives you, that has Wind Fury on it. You know, I've gotten that weapon. It's just very, very good. And especially if we happen to get Sword of Justice, that's actually a really good card, because actually when you play it, the interaction and how it works is you play Blingtron and you get the Sword of Justice, and it actually trigger the weapon's effect, making Blingtron a 4/5, which is pretty sweet actually. Now, there are some times where it screwed me over because that's the nature of all random effects. It's not always going to go your way. But I would say a solid 80 to 90% of the time, Blingtron's going to help you out. And you know, then our next card is actually going to help out with that. So if you happen to give your opponent a card like Light Justice, for example, or if you give him something pretty good like an Ashbringer, it can happen. But usually you want to try and play Harrison Jones the turn after Blingtron. And even late game, I've even played Blingtron and Harrison Jones in the same turn sometimes, thanks to Emperor Thorson. But that's a huge, huge swing in the game, and you usually win games off of that, being able to just get enough card draw to refill your hand up with threats. Keeping your weapon and destroying theirs and putting bodies on the board is just, things always go your way. Harrison Jones is perfectly fine as well, though, just because Oil Rogue is still pretty strong. And also, the one thing I like about Blingtron is, against decks like Paladin, where they have Tyrion and Oil Rogue, they buff their weapon a lot of time or prep it. Sometimes, you know, they'll prep it but not actually use it. Like, they'll buff it but they won't use it because they're trying to save up for a better, stronger next turn. Blingtron can really punish that and giving them a worse weapon than they usually would have, because the average weapon that you're going to get from Blingtron isn't going to be as good as something like an Ashbringer. So it can really throw your opponent back and really make it a lot tougher for them to deal with what's on your board. So Blingtron overall just extremely good, and you know, it's a mech, so we can actually get it out earlier with Mech Warper, and also it can be buffed by Screwdrain Clunker. Harrison Jones, I just went over that, not much to say there. Works really well with Blingtron. Lotheb, an extremely strong play when you've gotten a board presence. It's really strong against Freeze Mage and stuff like that, being able to just hold off their big spells and let you get a bunch of damage in, usually allowing you to close out the games with weapons. Because once you get to a certain, the one thing I like about our weapons are essentially how Archmage Antonidas works. You know, Archmage Antonidas is going to be your ending gameplay. You know, once you've ran out of mechs and once you've ran out of resources on board, you essentially just use Archmage Antonidas, recycle your spare parts into fireballs and just kill your opponent like that. Weapons are sort of the same way in this list. Weapons are our burn, so if we get our opponent to a low enough health, we can essentially just burn them out with our weapons, which is what Lotheb essentially helps out with. Being able to stop a Flame Strike for a turn, being able to stop a Brawl for a turn, you know, being able to stop Oil Rogue. This card's really good against Oil Rogue. You know, doing those kinds of things, we're able to get a ton of damage in, and it's just overall a really, really good card to have. Emperor Thorson is a card that I was sort of experimenting with this card. I might switch it out for Black Knight, for a little bit more utility, which I think is a little bit more important in this list. But Emperor Thorson, we have actually a fairly high top end, with like a fair amount of 5-drops and a fair amount of legendaries late game that we really want to get on the board earlier. And even having a handful of like 4 and 3 drops, you know, we're able to flood the board a little bit easier with Thorson, even if it gets only 1 activation off. And it also is another card similar to Mech Warper, where it essentially inherently has Taunt, so it's able to eat removal and allows you to clear the way for like Piloted Sky Golems and Dr. Booms and stuff like that. So Emperor Thorson has been good in this list. You know, having the interaction between Blingtron and Harrison, being able to anti-Keelbot for less and still play like a Piloted Sky Golem later on in the game in one turn. You know, there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. It just helps you sort of progress the board a little bit faster. But I'm still a little bit on the edge about it. I might put in Black Knight, but right now Emperor Thorson has been really good. Not much to say there. 2 Piloted Sky Golems. It's a mech. It's one of my favorite cards in the game, and it's just another sticky minion. Again, we're trying to play sticky minions and just keep a board presence while having favorable trades. Dr. Boom. Dr. Boom is just Dr. Boom. Minor interaction, we can actually buff our 1/1 bots with Screwjank Clunker. I have done that. It is sort of funny. That's not the reason why we're playing it, but it can happen. That's all I'll say about that. And our last card is Sneed's Old Shredder. So I was actually trying to figure out another good legendary to have in this deck. And I was looking at Warrior, and they do have a mech that is a legendary. They have Iron Juggernaut. Now the problem with that is we are a little bit more on the aggressive side of a mid-range matchup, or we're a little bit more on the aggressive scale, aggressive side of the scale when it comes to being a mid-range deck. And Iron Juggernaut really is a little too random for me. It's I feel I really want to get a little bit more out of my minion. Now, obviously, it's still a 6/5 body for 6 that can trade with a bunch of things, and you know it can end you the game. It does put a Pyroblast in your opponent's deck that kills them when they draw it, but it's a little bit too blah for me. It doesn't do enough. And because we're playing Emperor Thorson, I felt I could play a card like Sneed's Old Shredder. You know, we're able to play Emperor Thorson, and then turn 7 we can play Sneed's Old Shredder, which is really, really good. You know, cards like this, getting it out a turn earlier than you normally would, can be all the difference. It is also just a much better card stat-wise, getting it, because obviously it is higher costing, but getting a 5/7, dodges Big Game Hunter, but the fact that it summons a random legendary minion when it dies, you can get just so many. It's a random effect as well, but you get such a better outcome, because a lot of the majority of legendaries are fairly good stat-wise, and they come with a very, very good effect. So Sneed's Old Shredder is just really, really, really good. And you know, again, like I said, it's a mech, so it does get cheaper with Mech Warper. Screwjank Clunker can buff it if we need to push for extra damage, and we know they don't have a Big Game Hunter in hand. Stuff like that can happen. It's just that's the thing I wanted to make with this deck, is give it a little bit more late game than Mech Mage does, and things will take care of itself. And Sneed's Old Shredder has been really, really good. Not much to say there, but that is the list, you guys. Those are my thoughts on all the cards. And yeah, hopefully you guys try this deck out. I think if you want a mech deck that's not Mech Mage, definitely give this deck a try. It's very, very fun to play. A lot of different options for you, and a lot of different ways you can sort of slot out cards. So to make it a little bit more budget friendly, I guess. But hope you guys enjoyed it. I probably will stream this deck actually fairly soon. It's just one of my favorite decks, and look at that curve. It's just such a good, nice looking curve. We pretty much have something to do every single turn, which is what I like about it. It's not a very clunky curve, which means you're not just like hero powering it a turn and just not progressing your board. More often than not, you'll always have something to play, and that's a good thing with this deck. So that is the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys later. Hope you guys have an amazing day, night, morning, wherever you are, and I will talk to you guys later.